The last bus through Gangnam smelled like rain and exhaustion. Fiona's head kept dropping toward the cold window, jerking up, dropping again. 3 jobs, 1 daughter, and a body that had stopped asking permission to shut down. She didn't feel the bus stop. She didn't feel the driver call the final station. She only felt a hand, warm, careful, impossibly gentle, close around her shoulder, and a voice low enough to be mistaken for danger, say her name like he already owned it. When she opened her eyes, Chae-jong was crouched in the aisle, and something in his chest cracked open for the first time in 11 years. Welcome to Real Afro World, besties. This is our very first video here, and we could not think of a better story to start with. If you're new, hit subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. We're just getting started. Now let's get into it. Fiona didn't know his name yet. She only knew that the bus had gone dark and empty around her, that her neck ached from sleeping upright, and that a man in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent was kneeling in front of her seat, close enough that she could smell cedar and rain on him. "Miss." His Korean was clipped, precise, the kind that came from boardrooms, not bus stops. Then, seeing her flinch, he switched, careful, accented English. "You are at the last station. The bus does not go further." Fiona sat up so fast, her skull nearly clipped the window. Her hand flew to her chest, to the 2 folded papers tucked inside her jacket, like they were something alive. Pay stubs. Both of them. Both of them short. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." She was already gathering her bag, her badge from the convenience store still clipped to her collar, grease from the noodle shop still under her fingernails from the 6 to midnight shift she'd finished an hour ago. "What time is it?" 11:40, he said, and did not move back to give her room, the way a stranger should have. He watched her the way you watch, something you're afraid will vanish if you blink. "You have been asleep since Sinsa." Sinsa, that was 6 stops ago. Fiona's stomach dropped through the floor of the bus. 6 stops meant 6 stops in the wrong direction, meant a taxi she couldn't afford, meant getting home an hour later to a babysitter she was already 3 days behind paying, meant her daughter Adeze waking up tomorrow and asking why Uma's eyes looked like that again. "I have to go." She stood too fast. The paper slipped from her jacket and fluttered to the floor of the bus, landing face up at his polished shoes. He didn't hand them back right away. He looked down, and Fiona watched something shift behind his eyes. Quick, assessing, the look of a man who read balance sheets before breakfast, as he took in the numbers. 2 pay stubs, 2 different companies, combined less than what he probably tipped a valet in a week. "You work 2 jobs, he said. Not a question. 3. Fiona bent down and snatched the papers back before he could say anything else about them, heat crawling up her neck. Pity was the one thing she had learned to hate faster than hunger. "Look, thank you for waking me, but I really need to catch a taxi." "There are no taxis at this hour in Yeoksamdong bus depot," he said. "Not the kind you would trust your safety to. I've survived worse than a dark parking lot." The words came out sharper than she meant, exhaustion cutting the diplomacy off at the root. She pushed past him down the aisle, feeling the whole bus's remaining warmth leave with her, as she stepped down into the cold Seoul night. He followed. Not close, not threatening, just present, 3 steps behind her, his long shadow stretching alongside hers under the sodium lights of the empty depot, like he had nowhere else in the world he needed to be, at 11:40 at night. "You don't have to walk me anywhere," Fiona said without turning around. "I am aware." His voice was quiet, amused almost, in a way that made her want to turn and look at him properly for the first time, really look, past the coat and the watch that cost more than a used car. He had the kind of face that belonged on the cover of a business magazine, sharp jaw, dark eyes that missed nothing, the stillness of a man used to being obeyed. And yet something about the way he was looking at her now didn't match that stillness at all. It looked almost like hunger, not the kind that scared her, the kind that made her hands feel too warm inside her pockets. "Then why are you still following me?" "Because a woman who works 3 jobs and falls asleep holding both her pay stubs like they are the only thing keeping her upright," he said, "should not be walking alone through an empty depot at midnight, even if she insists she has survived worse." Fiona stopped walking. Something about the way he'd said it, not flirtatious, not performative, just flatly, devastatingly true, made her throat tighten in a way she didn't have the energy to fight tonight. "Who are you?" she asked. He considered the question a moment too long, like a man deciding how much of himself was safe to hand a stranger on a street corner. Chejong, the name meant nothing to her. It would, soon, plastered across the top floor of Union Line Group's headquarters in glass letters 2 stories tall, whispered in boardrooms with the particular reverence reserved for men who had clawed a shipping company into a conglomerate before he turned 35. But tonight, standing in a dark bus depot, in a coat that smelled like rain, he was just a man who wouldn't stop looking at her, like she was the only sharp thing in a blurry room. "Fiona," she said finally, because manners, even exhausted ones, died hard. "I have to go. My daughter's waiting." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, quickly hidden. "Daughter? Is that a problem?" "No." He said it too fast, too firm, like he was correcting something in himself rather than answering her. "It is not a problem." A black car eased to the curb. Sleek, silent. The kind of vehicle that didn't belong within a mile of this depot. A driver stepped out and opened the rear door without being asked, the practiced motion of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "I will take you home," Chejong said. "I don't get into cars with strangers." Fiona's voice hardened, the Lagos in her rising up through 11 years of soul like it never left. Especially not rich ones who materialize out of nowhere on a night bus. For the first time, something like a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face entirely, took 10 years off it, made him look almost boyish, almost reachable. A sensible policy. I would not trust me either. He reached into his coat and produced a card, plain white, embossed only with a name and a number. No title, no company logo. "Then take my car without me in it. I will walk to my own apartment. It is 4 blocks from here." Fiona stared at the card in his hand, like it might bite her. "I am not doing this to impress you," he said quietly, reading the suspicion in her face with unnerving accuracy. "I am doing this because it is midnight, you are exhausted, and something in me will not let me walk away and leave you to find your own way home. I don't entirely understand it myself." He paused. "You may consider that as strange as I do." There was something in the honesty of it, the way he seemed almost bewildered by his own concern, that cracked through Fiona's defenses faster than any smooth line could have. She took the card. Their fingers brushed for half a second, and she felt it travel up her arm like static. "Fine," she said, "but I'm sending you my landlord's number in case you're secretly a serial killer, so someone knows where I went." That smile again, wider this time. A reasonable precaution. She got in the car. Through the window she watched him standing under the depot's flickering light, hands in his pockets, watching the car pull away like he was memorizing the shape of it disappearing. Fiona told herself she wouldn't think about him again. She was wrong within the hour. The apartment was 2 rooms above a shuttered dry cleaner's in a neighborhood the guidebooks didn't mention, the kind of soul that existed underneath the glittering one. Cracked pavement, buzzing fluorescent signs, the smell of kimchi and motor oil mixing in the stairwell. Adayese was asleep on the pull-out sofa when Fiona let herself in, 6 years old and starfished across the cushions. One small fist curled around the corner of a blanket that used to be Fiona's mother's. The babysitter, Mrs. O from downstairs, looked up from the television with the particular tiredness of a woman who'd been paid late 3 times running. She wouldn't sleep till 8:30, kept asking when Uma would be home. "I'm sorry, I'll have your money by Friday, I promise." "Fiona," Mrs. O's voice softened, the way it always did when she looked at her too closely. "You cannot keep doing this to yourself." "I don't have a choice." Mrs. O let herself out without arguing, because there was nothing to argue with. Fiona locked the door, peeled off her convenience store vest, and sat on the floor beside the sofa, watching her daughter breathe. Adayeze had her father's ears and her own mother's stubborn chin, and absolutely no memory of the man who had signed away his name to her the moment she turned 4 and inconvenient. Fiona hadn't cried about that in over a year. She'd used all her tears up on rent instead. She pulled the 2 pay stubs from her jacket pocket and laid them side by side on the floor, doing the math she already knew the answer to. Convenience store, 11 hours a week. Noodle shop, 6 to midnight, 5 nights. Cleaning contract on weekends that barely covered Adiaze's after-school program. It never added up to enough. It had never once, in 3 years, added up to enough. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. The area code local. "This is Che Jong. I would like to confirm you arrived safely." CJ Fiona stared at it a long moment, thumb hovering. Then, against every rule she'd built for herself since Adeze's father walked out, she typed back, "Home safe. Thank you for the car." 3 dots appeared almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. Good. Sleep well, Fiona. She should have deleted the number. She told herself she would. Tomorrow, once the strange warm feeling in her chest faded back into the exhaustion where it belonged. She saw him again 4 days later, and it should not have happened at all. Fiona's cleaning contract that Saturday was a corporate account, a rotation her agency picked up twice a month, the top 3 floors of Union Line Group's headquarters, done after hours when the building was supposed to be empty. She'd cleaned it a dozen times without incident. She had never once seen an executive still at his desk at 9 on a Saturday night. She saw the light under his office door before she saw him. Assumed it was left on by accident, the way lights sometimes were, pushed the cart in without knocking because the room was supposed to be empty, and found Che Jong sitting behind a desk the size of her entire apartment, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to the elbow, staring at her like she'd stepped out of a memory he'd been trying and failing to shake for 4 days. Fiona. Her name in his mouth sounded different here, lower, disbelieving. She looked from him to the nameplate on his desk, Che Jong, Chief Executive Officer, to the glass wall behind him, showing all of Seoul laid out like a circuit board, and felt the floor tilt slightly under her feet. This is your company. It is. He stood, and something about the way he did it, unhurried, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world now that she was standing in his office, made her pulse trip over itself. You clean for Brightline Services. You know my cleaning company's name? I know the name of every vendor with access to this floor. A pause, and something almost sheepish crossed his face, at odds with everything about him. I may have also asked which crew was assigned to Saturdays. After I gave you my card, I found I did not want to wait for you to call. Fiona's grip tightened on the cart handle. That's, Mr. Che, that's a little reckless, inappropriate. I know. He didn't look ashamed of it, only honest. I have run this company for 6 years without once losing a night's sleep over anyone. 4 nights ago, I could not stop thinking about a woman asleep on a bus, holding 2 pay stubs like a lifeline. I do not know what to do with that, except tell you the truth about it. The office was silent except for the hum of the building's climate control and the muffled traffic 38 floors below. Fiona should have said something professional, should have pushed the cart past him and finished the floor and gone home to Adeze, and never thought about this man's midnight eyes again. Instead, she found herself asking, why me? Che Jong crossed the room slowly, stopping an arm's length away, close enough that she had to tilt her head to hold his gaze, far enough to still be careful of her. I don't know yet, he said, but I intend to find out. If you'll let me. I have a daughter, she said, the way she said it to every man who got this close, the sentence she used like a wall. I don't have room in my life for. She gestured vaguely at the glass, the view, the impossible distance between his life and hers. For this, I am not asking for room in your life tonight. His voice dropped, quiet and steady. I am asking if I may take you both to dinner. Nothing more than that. I would like to meet the reason you fall asleep on buses fighting to stay awake. Something in Fiona's chest, something she had bricked over carefully, methodically, for 3 years, shifted a single dangerous inch. I finished this floor at 11, she said finally, hating how unsteady her own voice sounded. Don't make me regret saying yes to dinner, Che Jong. He smiled, not the boyish flash from the depot, but something slower, more certain, like a man watching a door he'd been standing outside of finally begin to open. I don't intend to give you any reason to. Dinner became once a week. Once a week became the only day Fiona let herself look forward to. Che Jong met Adiaze on a rainy Sunday at a small noodle place 3 blocks from Fiona's apartment, nowhere near the glass towers of his usual world, and got down on one knee in the doorway to be at her daughter's eye level before he even said hello. which was the moment Fiona understood she was in far more trouble than she'd let herself admit. Adaeze, who trusted no one, who had learned early that men who smiled too easily didn't stay, studied him with the fierce suspicion of a 6-year-old who'd already lost one father. "Are you Uma's boyfriend?" she asked. "I am hoping to become someone very important to your Uma," Chae-jong said, with a gravity that made Fiona's chest ache. "But that is her decision to make, and yours too, if you'll let me try." Adaeze considered this with the seriousness of a judge. "Do you have candy?" He did not. He had, however, memorized which brand of gummy bears Adaeze mentioned once, weeks later, and had a bag waiting the next time they met, and it was such a small thing, such an obscenely small thing, for a man who owned half of Yoido's skyline, that Fiona had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry where no one could see. He was patient in a way that unsettled her, because she had learned not to trust patience from powerful men. He never rushed her toward anything, never made her feel the weight of everything he could give, and she could not repay. He simply showed up, at the noodle shop, at Adaeze's tiny school recital where he stood at the back so as not to embarrass her by being noticed, in the quiet 3 a.m. texts when Fiona couldn't sleep for worrying about rent. "You are allowed to need help, Fiona. It does not make you weak. I've never had anyone to need," she wrote back once, at her lowest, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know how. Then let me be the first person you learn on." She should have run from a sentence like that. Instead, she found herself, 6 weeks in, sitting across from him at a private table on the top floor of his own building, Adaeze, at home, with Mrs. O candlelight instead of fluorescent, the whole glittering skyline spread beneath them like something offered rather than owned, and understanding, with a lurch of terror, that she had already fallen. Not toward him, past the point of stopping. "People will talk," she said quietly, watching him across the candle. "You're bored. Your family. A single mother who cleans your office floors." Something dangerous flickered in his jaw. "Let them. That's easy for you to say. You're the one with the empire." "And you," he said, reaching across the table to close his hand over hers, warm and certain, "are the one who taught my empire what it was missing." His thumb moved slowly over her knuckles, and Fiona felt the touch everywhere at once, a live current running from her hand straight to the center of her chest. "I have built boardrooms, and shipping lines, and towers of glass for 11 years, Fiona, and none of it felt like anything until a woman fell asleep on a night bus, holding 2 pay stubs like they were the last thing standing between her and losing everything. I don't want your gratitude. I don't want to fix you. I want to stand beside you while you fix everything yourself, because you are the strongest person I have ever met, and I am asking you to let me love you while you do it." The candle flickered between them. Somewhere below, 38 floors down, Seoul kept moving, indifferent to the way Fiona's whole careful, guarded world was quietly rearranging itself around one man's hand closed over hers. "If I let you in," she whispered, "and you leave, I won't survive it a second time. Neither will she." "Then I will spend every day proving I am not going anywhere," Chae-jong said, "until proving it is no longer necessary, because you simply know." Outside, thunder rolled low over the Han River, and somewhere across the city, a woman none of them had ever met, a woman who called herself Chae-jong's fiancé in every boardroom that mattered, a woman whose family owned enough of Union Line's shares to make her claim feel real, was already dialing a reporter's number, already deciding that a single mother who cleaned toilets would not be permitted to ruin an arrangement 11 years in the making. Fiona didn't know that yet. She only knew the warmth of his hand and the terrifying, unfamiliar shape of hope. The woman's name was Seo Min Kyung, and she arrived at Union Line Group's headquarters on a Tuesday morning with a photograph in a manila folder and a smile that had never once, in 28 years, meant anything kind. Chae-jong. She didn't knock. She never knocked. 11 years of her family's shares sitting quietly beside his father's had taught her that doors opened for her whether she asked or not. She dropped the folder onto his desk, photographs sliding out in a fan, Fiona pushing a cleaning cart. Fiona at the noodle shop, laughing at something Adaeze had said. Fiona's hand in his, captured through a restaurant window 3 weeks ago when he'd thought they were unseen. "Care to explain this before I show it to your father? Or should I let him find out from the papers?" Chae-jong didn't look up from the shipping contracts on his desk, though his pen had gone still. Our engagement was your family's arrangement, Min-kyung. Not mine. I never signed anything. You didn't have to sign anything. It's been assumed since we were 19. Her voice sharpened, the practiced warmth cracking to something colder underneath. My father owns 18% of this company's shares. Your father owns 22. Combined, that's a controlling interest that keeps hostile takeovers off your desk every single quarter. You think that protection exists because you're brilliant? It exists because everyone in this industry believes we are already family. Then it's time everyone learned otherwise. Min-kyung's laugh had no humor in it at all. You'll destroy this company over a cleaning woman's daughter. Her name is Fiona. His voice was quiet, but something in it made even Min-kyung go still. And you will not speak about her or her daughter in this office again. She gathered the photographs back into their folder with hands that trembled, whether from fury or humiliation. Chae-jong couldn't tell and didn't care to. At the door, she turned back, and the smile she wore then was the most dangerous thing about her. I gave you a chance to end this quietly, she said. You should have taken it. The story broke 3 days later. Not the way Chae-jong had feared, not a scandal sheet's cheap headline, but something worse, more surgical, a business journal's exclusive, dressed up as legitimate reporting, questioning whether Union Line's CEO was compromising shareholder confidence with an inappropriate entanglement involving an employee of a third-party vendor. No names printed outright. Enough details that anyone who mattered would know exactly who. Fiona found out from Mrs. O, who found out from the noodle shop owner, who found out from a customer scrolling his phone at the counter. By the time Fiona got the actual article open on her cracked phone screen, her hands were shaking too hard to read it properly. Cleaning contractor, inappropriate relationship, shareholders expressing concern. They hadn't printed her name. It didn't matter. Brightline Services called her within the hour. Her supervisor's voice was apologetic in the specific, useless way of someone reading from a script written by lawyers. We have to pull you from the Union Line contract, Fiona, effective immediately. It's not personal. It's just optics, you understand. She understood. She understood with the particular, familiar clarity of a woman who had been made to disappear before. Quietly, efficiently, for the comfort of people with more power than her. She sat on the edge of the pull-out sofa long after the call ended, Adayaze's crayon drawings scattered across the coffee table, and felt 11 years of careful, hard-won stability crack straight down the middle. She didn't call him. She didn't have to. He was already standing outside her door 40 minutes later, rain soaking through his coat. No driver, no car. He had run, she realized, actually run 6 blocks from where he'd abandoned his vehicle in traffic. Fiona! He was breathing hard. I know. I'm handling it. Handling it. Her voice came out flatter than she intended, exhaustion and fear burning off into something colder. They pulled my contract, Chae-jong. 3 jobs, and now I have 2. Do you understand what that means for us? For her? She gestured toward the sofa where Adada slept, oblivious. This is my life. This isn't a headline you can spin in a press release. This is rent. I will cover. Don't. The word came out sharp enough that he actually flinched. Don't you dare offer to write me a check like I'm a problem your accounting department can absorb. Tears she'd been holding back for 3 days finally broke loose, hot and furious. I have spent 11 years making sure no one could ever say I depended on a man to survive. And now, because of you, I've lost the one steady contract I had, and there's a whole city about to start whispering that I'm some cleaning girl who trapped a CEO. You did not trap me! His voice cracked, raw in a way she'd never heard from him. Fiona, I have never in my life chased anything the way I have chased a future with you. I am not ashamed of loving you. I will not let a scandal manufactured by a woman protecting her father's shares decide what I am allowed to want. It's easy for you to say that from inside a glass tower. Fiona wrapped her arms around herself, shivering though the apartment was warm. You get to go back to your boardroom tomorrow, and none of this touches you. I have to go back to a job market that now knows my name is attached to yours. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rain against the window and Adese's soft, even breathing from the sofa. "I need space," Fiona said finally, quietly, and watched something in his face go entirely still, like a man absorbing a blow he'd been braced for and dreading in equal measure. "Not forever. I don't know. I can't think clearly with reporters calling my supervisor and my daughter's face on the edge of someone's camera lens. I need to protect her first. I need to protect us. Fiona, please." The word broke in half. "Please, just go home, Chae-jong." He left. He didn't argue, didn't push, though she could see in the rigid line of his shoulders how much it cost him to walk away when every instinct in him was clearly screaming to stay and fight for her, right there in the doorway. She watched him disappear down the stairwell into the rain and told herself the ache in her chest was relief. It wasn't. 7 days of silence followed, 7 days in which Fiona picked up extra shifts at the convenience store to cover the gap, in which Adayeze asked twice why Uncle Chae-jong hadn't brought more gummy bears, in which Fiona lay awake at 3 a.m., reaching for a phone that no longer buzzed with his name, and hating herself for missing the weight of it. She didn't know that across the city, Chae-jong hadn't slept either, that he'd spent those 7 days in a war of his own, calling an emergency board meeting, standing in front of his father, and Min Kyung's father, and 11 shareholders who controlled enough of Union Line to end his career with a vote, and telling them, without flinching, exactly what he intended to do. "I am prepared to buy out the Seo family's shares in full," he told the room, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "At a premium, from my own private holdings, effective immediately, severing any obligation, real or assumed, between our families. I will not have my personal life dictated by a marriage arrangement I never agreed to." His father, a man built from the same unmovable stone as his son, studied him for a long moment across the boardroom table. "You would risk this company's stability. For a cleaning woman." "I would risk anything," Chae-jong said, "for the first thing in my life that has ever felt real." The vote, when it came, was closer than he'd hoped and looser than he'd feared. The Seo family's shares were bought out within the week, at a cost that made even Chae-jong's accountants pale, but by Friday, the arrangement that had shadowed him since he was 19 years old was gone, severed cleanly, no longer a debt owed to anyone but himself. He didn't tell Fiona any of it. He went to her instead, empty-handed, no announcements prepared, no grand press conference to prove his point. Just a man standing in the rain outside a dry cleaner's on a Friday evening, because some things, he'd decided, were owed in person, or not at all. Fiona opened the door already knowing, somehow, before she saw his face, that everything had changed. "I severed the arrangement," he said, before she could speak, rain dripping from his hair, his coat, soaking through the collar of a shirt that had probably cost more than her rent, and that he clearly hadn't thought to protect from the weather on his way here. The Seo family's shares, the marriage expectation, all of it. It's gone. I should have ended it the moment I realized what I felt for you, instead of letting you carry the weight of a scandal that was never yours to carry. Chae-jong, I am not here to ask you to come back to me tonight, he said quickly, like he'd rehearsed it and was terrified of forgetting a word. I know I hurt you. I know my world crashed into yours without asking permission, and that you and Adaze paid a price for that. I never should have let you pay. I am here because I needed you to know the truth stopped being complicated the moment I chose you over everything my family built me to become. What you do with that truth is entirely yours to decide. Fiona stood in the doorway, rain blowing sideways past him into the hall, and felt something in her chest. Something she'd bricked over brick by careful brick since the day Adaze's father walked out. Finally, completely give way. I was scared, she admitted, voice shaking. Not of you, of how much I wanted this. Wanted you. I've built my whole life around needing no one. And then you showed up on a bus at midnight and undid 11 years of that in 6 weeks. And it terrified me more than losing the contract ever did. Then, be terrified, Chae-jong said softly, closing the distance between them until there was nothing left but rain and heartbeat. Be terrified, and choose it anyway. I am not going anywhere, Fiona. I have spent a week proving that to a boardroom. Let me spend the rest of my life proving it to you. She reached up, palm against his rain-soaked jaw, and felt him lean into the touch like a man finally allowed to exhale. "Come inside," she whispered. "You're soaked through, and Adeyeze has been asking about her gummy bears for a week." His laugh broke something loose in both of them, relief and love and exhaustion tangled together, and when he kissed her in the doorway, slow and certain, it tasted like every unspoken thing they'd both been too afraid to say until the storm forced it out of them. 6 months later, Seoul wore autumn like a second skin. Gold leaves scattered across the Han River Park, the air sharp and clean, the kind of afternoon that made the whole city feel like it was holding its breath for something good. Union Line Group's headquarters had transformed for one evening only. The top floor cleared of desks and boardroom tables, replaced with candlelight and white orchids, and 40 guests who mattered, including Mrs. O from downstairs, who had not stopped crying since she arrived. Adeyeze, 7 years old now and fiercely proud of the flower crown she'd insisted on choosing herself, stood at the front holding a small basket of petals, taking her role as flower girl with the gravity of a general commanding troops. Fiona stood in the private room adjoining the terrace, hands trembling as she smoothed the front of a dress that felt more like armor than fabric. Not because she needed protecting anymore, but because for the first time in 11 years, she was standing somewhere entirely undefended, entirely seen, and it still felt like something she had to brace for. "You look terrified," Mrs. O said gently, adjusting a stray curl at Fiona's temple. "I keep waiting to wake up," Fiona admitted. "Some part of me still expects a phone call, a bill I can't pay, a bus that never stops." "That part of you kept you and that girl alive for 11 years," Mrs. O said. "Let it rest now. It's done its job." Through the terrace doors, Fiona could see him waiting. Chae Jong, in a simple black suit, stripped of every trapping of the empire he ran, hands clasped in front of him, watching the doorway like a man who still couldn't quite believe his own luck. He'd asked her, months ago, whether she wanted a wedding that matched his world or one that matched hers. She'd told him she wanted one that matched theirs, the noodle shop where they'd first shared a meal as 3, the small Lagos community that had folded her into its arms the moment she arrived in Seoul with nothing, standing shoulder to shoulder with the executives and shareholders who'd once questioned whether she belonged in his life at all. She belonged. She had always belonged. It had simply taken a man brave enough to burn down an arranged inheritance to prove it. The music shifted. Adeyeze started down the aisle first, scattering petals with the solemn concentration of someone completing a sacred task, grinning back over her shoulder at her mother, with a gap-toothed smile that undid Fiona completely before she'd even taken her first step. Then it was Fiona's turn, and the room rose, and Chae Jong's face, this man who commanded boardrooms and shipping empires and had once terrified an entire family into surrendering their claim on his future, broke into something soft and unguarded and entirely hers, tears standing openly in his eyes as she walked toward him. "You came," he murmured, when she reached him, an old joke between them now, the way he always said it, like some part of him still braced, every single day, for her to change her mind. "I told you," Fiona whispered back, taking his hands in hers, steady now, in a way they had never once been steady on that bus 6 months ago. "I don't run from things that are real anymore." The officiant's words blurred into background music as Fiona looked up at the man who had knelt beside a sleeping stranger on a midnight bus and refused to let her carry her exhaustion alone. The man who had learned Adeze's favorite candy before he'd learned Fiona's, who had burned down 11 years of inherited obligation without a second thought, who had chosen a cleaning woman's love over an empire's convenience and never once looked back. When he slid the ring onto her finger, his hands were steady, his voice steadier still. "I have built everything in my life to last," he said, quiet enough that it belonged only to her. "You and Adeyeze are the first things I have ever built for love instead of legacy. I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to fall asleep exhausted on a bus again. Not because I am rescuing you, but because you will never again have to carry the weight of surviving alone. Just don't forget the gummy bears. Never," he said, and kissed her while the whole room rose in applause, while Adeyeze cheered loudest of all from the front row, her flower crown askew, her small fierce heart finally, fully certain that this one, unlike every promise before it, was never going to break. Outside the glass walls, Seoul glittered on into the evening, indifferent as always to the small, enormous miracles happening within it. A single mother who had once measured her worth in pay stubs, now measuring it in a love that had chosen her, fully, permanently, without condition. Somewhere below, buses kept running their midnight routes, carrying other exhausted women home to other small apartments, other quiet battles being fought one shift at a time. But Fiona would never ride one alone again. That's our story, besties. If Fiona and Chae-jong had you in your feelings, welcome to Real Afro World. This is our very first video, and we're just getting started. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tell us in the comments, what part hit you the hardest? We're so glad you're here.